Welcome to the CEO Stylist podcast, where two unlikely CEOs come together and rewrite the narrative of what it means to be a CEO stylist. Yovanka, Loria and Kirsten Harris are on a mission, giving stylists permission to join the movement of artists breaking the mold of what is meant to be for the hair industry and creating the life and schedule of their dreams. Fast forward through many failed attempts and lessons learned in the process, it's time to level up the playing field. It's time to call BS on what's been done before. Yovanka and Kirsten are ready to share it all, defying the odds of the industry and teaching you how to do the same.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here today on our first ever episode. Kirsten and I have been planning this for some time now, haven't we, Kirsten?
We sure have. Welcome and thank you everyone for listening to our first ever podcast.
Kirsten and I are so excited to be here. We're going to be sharing a little bit of our backstory and also our why behind the reason why we're doing this podcast.
Well, you say it's been a really long journey, Yo. I'm going to call you Yo for the sake of our listeners. I call her Yo. Her name is Yovanka. Some call you Yovanka. Anyway, Yo. That's how we're going to refer to you.
You can call me Yo.
This has been quite a journey. I think, when was it? 2021, we started talking and really getting serious about doing some really cool stuff together. And when you mentioned the thought about a possibility about doing a podcast, I seriously did freeze. But fast forward to, where are we? 2023. I think last year we really did start to get serious about it. And then, now we're here, March 2023, recording our first ever podcast together. We talk nearly every day. You're one of my best friends and one of the dearest people in my life. So, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, my story and I know your story, but, really
time for the world to hear.
I want to empower and inspire our listeners. So if there is a little bit of my life lessons and journey that can inspire others, then I feel like I'm doing a good job.
Absolutely. And I think you're one of the very few people that came into my life at the right time. And I really do, attest to my success, you being the little secret person that helped me in the background, really. And I think that's why we come together to share our journey and our story in hopes that we can also help inspire just one person out there. If we've done that, then we've done our job. And I think also along the way, we'd love to have other guests on our show as well, whether they're part of our industry or not, and other women who have defied the odds and gone against the grain like what we have, and can also share their story and their journey and help continue to inspire other people. And I think going back to our story, I think the biggest thing for me, and I think with you, we've spoken about it, I wish we had what we have these days when we were younger, because I think we would have been in a completely different situation. I know I speak about my journey because I never really had, women opening doors for me. If anything, they were closing doors for me. And I think the biggest message in all this is you're forever going to have people say no. No to you, no to this, don't do that.
And also judge.
And
what about judgment?
And judgment and ego. And that's a whole nother podcast series. But I think I'll start with my journey and I'll go back to, when I was 5 years old, I told my parents that I was going to be a hairdresser. And I really did stick to that sentiment. At 12 years old, I begged my father to work in a salon part-time. And he said, hell no, over my dead body, you're going to work in a salon. And the stubborn person that I am, guess what? I started working in a salon.
And how old were you?
12 years old, part-time. And the women would always chastise me and say, that's all right, little girl. When you get bigger, you can do my hair. But I really did have a natural flair for hair. And I would just rip out all these amazing styles for them and then continue on to do it for my friends. So I really do believe I was born with that natural gift for hair, which led me to starting my apprenticeship at 15 years old. Wow. And that's where it was it was a massive journey for me going back then, because back then it was very different to how it is now. We didn't even have a union. I remember being stuck in a letterbox crying, wanting some guidance and some advice, because back then we weren't even getting lunch breaks. We weren't even allowed to go to the toilet. Like, it's nuts. It's borderline.
How did your pay arrive back then?
How did my pay arrive?
Do you remember?
All of $71 and, after working 45 hours while all my school friends were complaining that they were tired. And I was like, what are you talking about? So that's how my pay would arrive. I think it was a check back then.
Was it a check or
It was a
cash?
check.
Cash in an envelope
It
by
was a
Chubb?
check and some change in an envelope as well.
Now, without disclosing your age though, and I know, you know, being in a creative space, was email even a thing back then?
Hell no.
Email,
Hell no.
internet,
Hell no.
social media?
No, none of that. None of the above.
Yeah.
And I think back then I can honestly say, you know, working for women, because I really looked up to women in our industry, I don't think that they really took their job seriously. If anything, it was borderline abuse.
So what did life look like as an apprentice,
Back
as
then?
a 15-year-old? Where were you going? Were you in salon training? Were you going to college? What
In
was
salon training was at 6 months and it was Christmas time and they're like, can you get out on the floor and cut hair? And I was like, sure. That was our salon training.
Right.
It was not until after I ended up leaving that salon, and then I ended up, you know, working for one of Adelaide's most reputable salons. And I must admit, that was probably one of the only salons that I worked at that really taught me, you know, that structure and training. And I got a lot of that out of it today, which, funny story, fast forward 20-something years on, they've actually come on as one of our stockers, which I'm super, super proud of.
Which we'll circle back to. But what was life like as an apprentice? Is it all the horror stories I've heard
stories
about, you know, getting toothpaste and with a toothbrush
100%.
and cleaning the grout on your hands and knees. And
Scrubbing the skirting boards.
you'd been cleaning out ashtrays back then.
Using ashtrays to remove colour. And also I remember like shampooing and looking outside the window, and you would literally be berated for looking anywhere but the client's head. You know, you didn't really have a voice. She really didn't have a say, but we just took it, you know, on the, what's it called?
On the chin.
We just took it on the chin. And I come from a European family. So that was like, it was a walk in the park. That's just what you did. But in saying that, I wouldn't take away any of those experiences because it really taught us to toughen up. You know, I think now it's completely different. It's gone full circle where not all, but some, you know, that younger generation can be a little bit more sensitive.
So how many salons did you work in through your apprenticeship?
So just two.
Just two.
So after that, I left and I finished my apprenticeship at one of SA's reputable salons, Clip Joint.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I met one girl, which I won't really disclose her name, but I went to go work for her after. And she was this big deal in the industry at the time. And a few people had warned me about her, but I just looked up to her so much. And we were going back to circling what you were saying, what we were doing with hair. Back then, I was doing photo shoots on the weekend. I was working with her in nightclubs, doing hair for free. Like,
oh, wow.
Absolutely.
What, in the bathroom at night?
Not in the bathroom, in the back room. They would do, you know, hair shows, and fashion parades were a big thing. And any opportunity that came my way, I just jumped at it.
So hours weren't a thing.
Hours weren't a thing.
Like you were be grateful for having a job.
I was not only grateful, work to me to this day is not work, because I truly was operating from that artist. I really never looked at it as a job. It was always a career. You know, in saying that, the girl that I ended up working for, she just got really drunk with power and really didn't really look after us how she should.
Yeah.
But in saying that, again, it's really has really taught me how to be the leader that I am today. And I really thank her for that opportunity. No matter what good or bad comes of it, it's just what you learn, the lessons that you learn from it. So I always have been that person that, you know, annoying optimist that always takes the great lessons from it, which, you know, ultimately led to me ending up to do my own journey and wanting to do things very, very different.
So when you'd finish your apprenticeship, you're working and it didn't work out so well with that
It didn't
employer.
work out so well.
And then didn't you go?
I fled to America. Yep, I fled to the US.
You relocated to the US?
I relocated to the
How old were you?
I was 22, 23.
Wow,
You know, and
huge.
especially my parents, European parents, are
Single white female
You're
off
gonna
on
die.
your journey.
yes, you're going to die. You can't go over there. And I was like, watch me. I think I didn't let it define me. I didn't allow that situation to define me, but I didn't realize at that time I was letting it drive me.
Wow.
It's a good
And
one,
didn't
isn't
you
it?
go to New York?
Went to New York.
So you did things at a large scale quite young. Like if you were going to bite off a little piece of America, you might have started in a more low-key.
100%.
But
I
you
didn't
took
even
on-
realize what I was doing, but I honestly, like I can say this now, but back then it was like a little voice tapping me. You need to go to America. There's something there for you. I just didn't know what it was.
So why New York?
I can't explain it. It was just I was having these dreams. It's called intuition now. I understand it. It was my gut.
Yeah.
Because even back then when everyone was telling me, no, don't do this, I was just this stubborn little thing that had something to prove, not to anyone, but to myself, which ironically, 20 years on, the people that helped me then came in to help me later on with securing my own hair extension brand. So everything I do believe happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And I went to New York, I went to LA, and that's where I first got introduced to hand-tied hair extensions, where I was working in a salon.
Wow. So what year is this?
Oh, God, don't ask me
I know.
what year.
I just need to put it into context now. So,
Actually, it was like maybe about 25 years ago.
So I can't count that
Maybe
far
more.
back. So we're in the 90s.
We're in the 90s.
You're like at 1998 maybe. Is that
Possibly.
right?
Told you you're the
99?
brains
Yeah.
of this operation. I can't add or spell.
Yeah. So 98, 99. Woo.
Correct.
Some people in this room might not even been born yet.
That's true. Or listening. They're like, what?
Yeah.
And then what had happened?
So you got introduced to hair extensions.
So I got introduced to hair extensions.
So they were big in America back then.
Back then, they were on the down low, like they weren't even popular then. So what happened, I was working for this big salon. They had 20 staff and there was these African girls using it. And I remember going over and having a chat and they were doing it on corn braids.
Oh.
But I couldn't corn braid. I can do anything in hair. The only thing I can't do or couldn't do is corn braids. But I always remembered it. I just wasn't ready to take it in then because I was doing my thing. I was always, really, I love the art of hair and I love doing everything with hair. Whether it was cuts, colours, upstyling, that was my jam. And then I came back home and I was, lost between two worlds. I didn't know whether I wanted to stay here or go back over there. And that's when I ended up falling in love with a very handsome Russian man.
Whoa.
The rest is history.
And that handsome Russian man, you just happened to marry and have two amazing children with,
who's really been, become the pillar of what we do. And that's essentially how it happened. I came back, had my beautiful kids, who, as amazing as they are, the biggest pain in the backside was, they just didn't like food. And that was one of my passions that I developed. Hence why I always send you little inspiration of food. But they weren't.
That is something we do on the side. We're going to talk about that one day.
That could be a whole podcast in itself. So I, was like, screw you guys. If you don't like my food, I'm going to go back to hair because they're going to appreciate what I do. And, essentially that didn't happen because I was walking back into a salon where clients were really choosing me. I wasn't choosing. I had no control over my client base and who was coming into the salon. And I was trying to, back then this is when social media exploded and everyone was doing these balayages and these root fades. And I remember trying to do all these things and these clients were complaining that I was turning them brunette and that I was trying to overcharge them. And it was a mess. And I remember feeling really undervalued and depleted. But I really had this glimmer of hope because I saw what these amazing stylists like Natalie Ann, and back in the day it was Edwards & Co. And there was a few, Secret Hair and Harlow.
Yeah.
And I really looked up to them and I was like, wow, if they can use social media as a platform, maybe I do have the power to flip the script and really attract the type of work and the clients that I want. I just didn't realize I didn't tap into it. You hadn't entered my life then. And I slowly started to really put out, the feelers of extensions. And because no matter how much work I did, as in color work and how many clients I did, I just was the same result at the end of the day. No one was ever satisfied and it left me feeling really resentful at the end of the day and I was completely burnt out. Again, going home and not feeling that love and not feeling, the very reason why I got into hair was the very reason I kept wanting to exit the industry because it was the same results.
Yeah. And there was a trend emerging with long, beautiful hair. That's what women desired.
That's what they desired. And all these beautiful Hair and Harlow and Natalie Ann and, I couldn't achieve those looks without extensions. I just knew that was a natural step. And then there was these girls in America who were doing amazing with it. And I was trying to get hair from America. I was going to go do a course over there, but it just didn't suit my situation with my family. I couldn't just hop on a plane and go. So I just
How old were your kids at that stage?
They were, I think, 4.
Yeah, so
5, and I was itching to do something. I was like, I want to make an impact and how do I do it? I just kept questioning and, I just kept researching and I went and did a course in Melbourne and completely fell in love with weft extensions.
Why is that?
it really changed the playing field and the game of, individuals and the damage that it caused.
Yeah.
And there was so many more benefits that I could see with it. Obviously there was still pros and cons with it, because the hair was one thing that I could, distinctly see that there was a disconnection between the extension hair and the client's hair, because it all became about color blending and all that stuff with it. I was just limited with the hair that I was using. So that's where my journey really began. And I think I just told a couple of people. It's funny because clients come back now and they're like, I didn't even think, when you manifest stuff and you put things out and you say it without realizing. And I was always like, this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm going to do next. And I just kept researching. And ultimately, this is 4 years in, and thousands of dollars invested in my training, and thousands of dollars invested in sourcing hair. And I just kept falling short, and the pitfalls of the extension world really, rang true. And I was like, imposter syndrome kicked in. And I remember.
And let's open the floodgates to when you're sourcing internationally. Once you start that journey, you invite a lot of noise in that area as well. You'll get lots of offers for samples and
100%.
Yeah, and that still happens. I know that still happens for you today in your business.
And, I had not only that, but my husband, Vlad, he personally went to China because he had a brother that was working over there in a manufacturing plant. So I was like, you're going to go find this hair.
Yeah.
So
and just to put it into perspective, at a guess, how many manufacturers of extension hair do you think exists in China?
It's like a needle in a haystack. So to put it in perspective, you're emailing these what you think is a reputable supplier. Then you finally get there, and Vlad's meeting him in a back alley, and you're like, "Take me to the factory," and they're like, "No, we don't go to factory." So it is
because they're not the actual wholesaler.
They're not the wholesaler.
Producer.
They're just agents.
Yes,
but
they might be 3 layers up.
There might be 3 layers up. They create all these amazing looking websites. You go meet them. Some are in an alley, some are in a little office. Very, very rarely, because they, don't want to expose themselves. And the ones that really find that genuine supplier, once you start learning about the supply chain and how that all works, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
We'll get into that,
I
think,
absolutely.
down the track. But Vlad went to, Ukraine, and I was like, now I'm going to find the best hair.
And
Russian
hair and
Russian hair and
Remy hair.
And once I learned, I can't wait to divulge all that in another complete different episode. But, I was at the 11th hour just going to back out and be like, no, this is not for me.
Was it that hard?
So hard.
Wow.
So hard. And every little bit of money I was making from extension, I could see that the clients, this was benefiting clients. So I had to figure out how I was going to make, because if I could get hair from America or even in Australia back then, I never would have gone on this journey to get my own hair.
Yeah.
But I knew I had the standard of Beverly May hair.
Yeah.
And I was like, where does she get this hair from? Where does she get this hair from?
And for our listeners, who is Beverly May?
So
I know
Beverly
she's now
May,
retired. But.
Yes. So Beverly May is now retired, but she was the queen of hair extensions back in her heyday. And she was around for a good 25, 30 years and had a stellar reputation in the hair extension world. And I had worked with her. I had known her when I was younger, and her hair was incredible. I had never felt anything like it. So I really had a benchmark, and Beverly May's hair was that benchmark. So I kept saying, where does she get this hair from? I want Beverly May's hair. I want Beverly May's hair. Little did I know, when I was about to kick everything, burn everything to the ground.
Yeah.
I just, being tenacious and stubborn as I am, I kept digging and digging and digging. And then what happened, as you know, I ended up finding, or someone helped me, a very unexpected person ended up helping me, connected me with her supplier.
Yeah, wow.
And they were about to retire and give up the game. And he is this beautiful Korean guy in Los Angeles. And I emailed him my hopes and dreams and my vision and what I wanted. And he reached out to Beverly May, and she had exclusive rights to him. And she basically gave him the green light to be able to work with me, and said to him, give her whatever she wants.
That's amazing.
Amazing. Full circle moment.
Yeah.
That's why this is a whole nother podcast.
So that gave you hope to go, this is the future.
I knew this.
Yeah.
I knew
Yeah.
every part of my journey was to lead to this moment.
You found the diamond.
Found the diamond in the rough. And it really, he said, if you get on a plane, I will help you. And that's exactly what I did with my husband. We went on there on a whim. and there was no turning back. Once I got that hair, I instantly knew that there was something different. Obviously, we still had to tweak things, but what a great story. What a great journey.
And do you remember what year that was?
That was, I think about 7 years ago, maybe eight years ago. And then that's what happened with our salon space. It was just me and Ash, and I really didn't even envision where I've come to today. Back then, it was just like, I want a great product. And I think if I didn't have his backing, there's no way that I would have been able to navigate this world or that world. And that's when you came in with marketing, which is a whole different thing.
Well, let's just back it up though, because I think you've missed this big gap of 3 years. You worked, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'll take over for a minute. You worked tirelessly in your salon with your own customer base.
100%.
To create a cult. I'll say cult. I say that lovingly because it was really when a consumer started, and I can speak from experience, when a consumer started researching that brand, it was something that was quite unique.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say researching the brand, because I didn't even realize I was a brand. Remember, I speak about I was at the shops in my Ugg boots and someone came up to me and was like, I just want to thank you. Your brand has, completely changed my life and my hair. And she walked away and I was like, I'm a brand? And I was like, shit, now I can't go to the shops in my Ugg boots. I didn't even realize. It's so funny looking back on it now.
Yeah.
And I was like, I better get my shit together, and this is going to help a lot more people than myself. So I really had to work to get over my own shit and over my own, comfort zone, because there was so much more that came.
What was the most satisfying thing though, when you saw your clients leave? How did that make you feel?
I think also they genuinely, because we've come from a world where it doesn't matter what you did for clients, it was never enough.
Yeah.
As whereas with this, when you flip that script and that energetic transaction that you get from, they're just honestly like 9 out of 10 times you've been in the salon, they're literally in tears crying, happy tears, because you've just given them the most confidence. Like these women stop going out, they stop feeling like themselves, such low self-esteem from not having good hair. So when you give someone that, honestly, you can't put a price tag on it. So that I was like, wow, now I really want to share this with other stylists. And that's why, part of going back to why we do what we do is hopes that we can pass that special magic touch onto other stylists who are still stuck, well, not so much stuck, but stuck in that conditioning that we all were, including myself, that had to really fight to go against the odds of this industry and from what we've, always done. And, going back to what we thought was being successful in the industry and servicing, 1 million clients a week and doing what we do to only feel so shit at the end of the week and feeling so undervalued. So that is just, in a sense, just a whole different dynamic on its own.
So fast forward 7 years on.
7 years on.
Where are you at today?
Well, I'm hoping to retire really soon.
No, that's
no. I joke.
You're speaking smack.
I joke. I'm getting.
You're just getting warmed up.
I'm getting warmed up. Honestly.
No, you've got your salon.
We've got my salon. We've got our extension brand.
Yeah.
And now we've got education that sits beside it. And now we're, taking that around the country. I've formed a collaboration with a girl, Val, from Los Angeles in Salt Strands, to form a collaboration with her. And now we're just doing what we do. And that's part of, getting our message across through podcasts, through marketing to, hopefully spark that light in another stylist or a business owner.
So I call you Queen. Yes, Queen.
Call each other Queen.
But really, Beverly May has passed the baton to you. That's one really strong Adelaide brand supporting another. And I'm sure she keeps tabs on where you're at.
She does. And it's so weird because I feel like that notion of what I said where women don't support. Growing up, I never had that.
Yes.
So I think I've always taken the high road. You hear people do shit things all the time. I've never once wished anything bad upon anyone. I've never spat out vitriol or hatred. I just always internalized it and was like, how can I be better? How can I do things different? And I honestly think that is the biggest key to being successful is when you internalize it and you stop looking left and you stop looking right and you just do you and you just get better. And then no one can take away, what you do.
So I've got a question for you.
Sure.
Your proudest moment in business? What is it?
I don't think I allow myself.
I knew she was going to say that.
I really, really don't, because guess what, baby? I'm just beginning. Honestly, I don't think I've allowed myself.
No, allow yourself for a moment. Go on. You can. I'll give you permission.
I think, honestly, the beautiful community that we've built,
yes.
Now I'm so proud to say we've got so many women on our side. I think that was the biggest thing, because I went through a period where it was like, I don't like people. It's not that I didn't like people. I just don't like shit people or the wrong people. Now we have a beautiful community. We have the best clients, the best team, and that's, I think, a testament. That's honestly my proudest. And my daughter and my son, they get to see that. And I think the proudest thing is when I used to have to work, in the beginning, when I had to work a Sunday or I had to work a little bit extra, and I would say to my daughter, I'm so sorry, Mummy has to work today. And my daughter, who was 7 at the time, said, Mum, don't worry about it. You're helping people and you're doing this for our future.
Oh, I
so
love
a
that.
7-year-old, because that's what I say, you can't bullshit a kid.
Absolutely not.
You can't bullshit anyone on social media. I think energy is powerful. So that's my story in a nutshell.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing.
And thank you. Once we get into, a little bit more about how you came into my life, I don't want to get all soppy, but you really, really, really did contribute to a major part. Can't wait to share that. All right. So how about, Kirsten, now your turn.
Look,
how about you share your story?
My story wasn't born out of a salon when I was 12 and sweeping floors or anything like that. I grew up in a split family. I right back to, I've got Aussie parents. My mum and dad divorced before I think I even turned 1. And I had a great childhood, but it was spread between 2 family lives. So on my mum's side, my mum worked to put food on the table and she had jobs. She never really chased a career. That was that generation that, my mum was a flight attendant. I think back then the rules were that as soon as you got married and had children, you weren't allowed to fly. Imagine that happening.
Or you had to
today.
be a certain height.
You had to be, well, she hit the height factor. It was just your feet weren't allowed to leave the ground once you had children. Anyway, can you imagine that rule in today's world? And then on the other side was my stepmother and my father together. They were very career driven, very much about education, and you must go to university and career's everything. Anyway, I had a moment when I was 16. It must be the pinnacle age where you think you know everything in life. And I decided that school was not for me, that I'd outgrown that. And I was put in a position where I was forced to make decisions. And I remember in that moment, my parents saying to me, well, you're on your own. You need to live and die by your own decision. I went, okay, cool. I'm going to do that. So I chose career. So hadn't finished school and went and got my first job. And my first job was the receptionist down at Port Adelaide for a big international logistics company, 50 staff. And it really was, I guess, the similarities between apprenticeship was, you would get the bell rang when you needed to make the boss, and the boss just happened to be my stepmother, by the way. She'd click her fingers for a cup of tea. My other job was, I do remember emptying those ashtrays and doing the shopping and doing the mail run. And
you just didn't question anything.
Yeah,
you did what you had to do.
We had women, the men didn't back then. It was just so random, but we didn't challenge it. Typewriters at their desk. We had to type everything. We sent faxes. I sound really old now. Telexes, but the really cool thing about my apprenticeship back then in a corporate space was I learned about the world. We were shipping freight all over the world, and it was pretty exciting, just the thought of being able to create a set of documents that owned a piece of stock that you would then freight overseas. That's really what it was. So I became a master at that because there was this little determination in me that I was really going to prove my parents wrong, that I didn't need my education back then, that I could forge a career.
That's right, because back then it was all about going to uni.
It was all about going to university. So yeah, I really was determined at a young age. So I think by the time I was 21, I was in my 3rd position and I was the general manager. So,
wow.
And it's really funny. I reflect what was life like as a 21-year-old. I'd bought my first house back then. I'd settled. I was in a relationship with a boy I'm not with anymore. But back then I just went, is this what life is? Like I've settled really quickly and it kind of scared the crap out of me. in Adelaide house. You know, I was nearly married. I was the GM 21 of this little
It's a massive
company.
responsibility.
And I thought, is that it? Like, and then, you know, you had this thought, you know, you're retiring at 64, 65. Am I going to do this for the next 40 years? Hell no. I broke up with life in general.
You blew up your life.
I blew up my life literally and sold my house eventually, split up with my boyfriend and packed my bags and took my cats and I went to Melbourne. Back then, that was the time when Adelaide were relocating all their offices in the corporate space over to Melbourne. So it was pretty, I think back then, our generation, we either went international or, you know, went interstate. So I chose Melbourne. I'd been there quite a bit. Anyway, so that kind of started this whole career path. I was still in international logistics. I got headhunted by this company in Singapore. Like, I'm barely 22 years old and I've got this international publicly listed company knocking on my door saying, please, we'd like to invest in you. We'd like you to invest in this company.
Am I correct to say back then when you were 21, 22, acting like you were 45?
Yes.
Was there a period, I remember you saying that you couldn't even disclose your age?
My age was a lie.
Expected you to to cover it up, right?
Absolutely. I was 22 years old and so it was someone that I worked with in the company that we were employed, but we were agents for this big brand and this brand wanted to open up in Australia in their own right. So they came to us as the two general managers. She was Sydney-based, I was Melbourne-based. They came to us directly and said, we'd like to, because they knew that maybe the company, it sounds really shit now when I explain it this way, but they knew that they were the lifeblood of that business, but they were so massive internationally that they wanted to set up here. They trusted us. They had a relationship with the girl that I worked with, but she didn't remember my age. So she told them, I think at the time I was 27 and I was 22. So even then they questioned that, oh, maybe she's a bit too young. Are you sure? And
God, little did they know you're like a spring chicken. Literally.
So I had to carry that lie with me. It was pretty funny actually, even with my own team here. So we opened this company in Australia. I had, you know, that determination kicked in again. We were very much the underdogs in that industry and we were wholesaling to other freight forwarding companies back then. So, you know, we had nothing, but I went and secured this massive office in Tullamarine and it was like 150 square metre space, if you can put that in perspective. And literally my glass office sat in the middle. I felt like a fish in a fishbowl. And I never forget the day, it was just me. And I think maybe about week 6, I employed a person that sat on the other side of that glass wall and we were just plugging away and it was great. Like I learned so much. And I never forget the day one of my biggest competitors walked in unannounced into the office, sat in my office, and he used those whole intimidation tactics about, what are you trying to prove, Kirsten? Like with this big office, you know, basically saying, who do you think you are?
Trying to underhand you.
And I think in that moment, I could have been that timid little, you know, 22-year-old. I'm not little, I mean, I'm tall.
Of course,
but
wallflower.
And he was a lot older and a lot more experienced. And at a point, I probably looked up to him in that career. But in that moment, I went, no way, I am not going to settle for this. And I just said to him, you know what, if you've got nothing nice to say, then there's the door. And my heart was beating in my chest. I'm like, holy moly, where did that come from? That, you know, that little bit of
internal fire.
Yeah. So that was my fight. And I harnessed that and I continued to work and we worked really hard and I built quite a reasonable team and we went from the underdogs to literally ranked number one in our part of that industry within 3 years. So it was really cool. I got to see a lot of the world. I traveled a lot. I was a director of that business. So, you know, I was in the boardroom.
By the age of
23, by this
insane.
stage, 24, you know, in boardrooms with a whole lot of men, I'll have to say. Like women back then really were
You had to get your masculine energy on.
limited. There was probably 4 of us in a room of typically be 20, 25. And yeah, you know, the girls coming from Australia and our office is based in Singapore. So, you know, I saw a lot of Asian countries. I was literally way every 3 months at least. So I saw a lot of the world and it was amazing opportunity. I was grateful every day for that. And then I fell in love at the same time. So I happened to fall in love with a boy from Adelaide who he thought maybe I'd come to my senses. This was very early on in my career in that company, that I'd come back to Adelaide, that maybe this was just a thing. I blew up my life, I'm going to come back. But I didn't. He said, oh, you're really not coming back. So we'd been long distance for a while. So he moved over eventually and started his career. So he actually worked for me. So he was great at selling. So that really helped build that business quite quickly. And then we fell pregnant unexpectedly. I'll say that. That unexpected pregnancy is now nearly 22. That's my son, Tristan. So, balancing that kind of crazy job with motherhood was really interesting and testing, because part of my contract with that company was that they could relocate us anywhere in the world within that brand. And they had a lot of offices at that stage. And that probably wasn't something that I was going to sign myself up to. So eventually I did resign from my position. Oh, and the other thing was, maternity leave, what was that? Because I work for an international company, there was no rules around what you can and can't say to a pregnant woman. And
what, you went back?
Maternity leave just wasn't what do you mean you need time off to have a baby?
Wow.
Don't you have someone to look after your
corporate world?
Yeah. So really, I think that gave me a taste that this is definitely absolutely not where I see myself for the rest of my life. I'm not going to subscribe to this. I don't want that culture to exist even within my own team, let alone my family. So I did have maternity leave for a good 9 months and it was great. It was, you never get that time back with your kids. And then I moved into recruitment for that industry because I thought, I've had some pretty ordinary experiences with recruitment agencies and people and culture, and I wanted to make a difference. So I tried that for a while and I realized the biggest difference between freight and people, I can control freight. I can move shit all around the world, but I cannot control people's outcomes and personalities and the companies. Sometimes the companies that we were positioning them into, it just didn't work out. In the world of recruitment back then, I have no clue what it's like now. If you had a failed employee, like a failed start, we don't get paid. Or you might have got paid, but then you have to give the money back because you have a guarantee on that person. That was just too risky. So there was a lot of lessons there, a lot of expensive lessons. And my husband and I did that together. Then I just had a baby. So that's number 2. She came along 5 years after my son. So her name's Taya and she's now nearly 17. But, she was tiny and I was 32. Felt like I'd seen and done everything in international freight. I went, okay, what next? And my husband,
is this part of the story which I love?
This maybe, I'm not sure. What next? So I'm 32. I'm like, what am I going to do for the next 32 years? Seriously, I feel like I've just lived a whole life. But this was really about my first lesson about recreating your life. I had no idea. I had awesome skills, but it was all very much in one industry, really. Knew how to run a business, but in international freight, I knew how to ship freight around the world. And then on Seek, of all places, there was this job that became available, and franchising was massive back then in the early 2000s. And there were some really cool brands that were, growing successfully through a franchise concept. And so my husband found this job on Seek. He printed out the job and said, you need to apply for this. And I went, what would they want? And this was they were already a very successful brand. I think at this stage, they'd probably been around for 4 or 5 years. And I said, there's no way I would get a job there. That self-doubt, kicked in.
Do you want to say what the brand was?
So the brand was Boost Juice Bars. And back then, Janine Alice she's still a massive household name, but everyone that knew Boost knew that brand story. And I went, why would they employ me? He's like, you must put your application in. So I went, okay, I rolled, put my application in back then, sent it via email. I'd never had a resume, by the way. So this is the first time I'm pulling this resume together. And within half an hour, I got a phone call and I thought they've probably, it's probably just their HR team. I've been in HR. I know what that was like. When can you come in for an interview? A bit of a side story. I'd had an interview booked and they had already told me up front that it was a 4-stage process. I knew that my first interview was with HR. So went in the following day because I thought, let's just kick this off. I'm like going to have a midlife crisis at 32 if I don't find a job. And I had this interview and she said, yeah, I went through all the usual things. I'm sure everyone that's listening understands an interview process. And she said, look, there's another 3 stages, the final stage being that you'd meet with Janine. But, and I said, well, roughly how many applications have you had for this position? She said, about 80. And I thought, you walk away going, there's no chance at all. Anyway, and I think that week I'd had a psychic booking with someone that I'd been on the wait list for months roll up to this psychic meeting. And she's like itching her arms. And she said, oh, you're going to have a change in career. I said, yeah, I'm having a midlife crisis at the moment. And she said, oh, like I see juice bars and
no way,
helping people in business. And she said, have you applied for a job at Boost Juice? I said, yeah. She said, I shouldn't say this, but you're going to get the job.
That's insane.
Knowing that I still had another 3 stages to go, which I did go through those 3 stages. And then I started in that position. So that was amazing. Like I learned so much. It was like really being the 16-year-old.
And before you, she was one of my secret idols. And her book is one of the stories I was like, if Janine can do it, if her story just resonated with me. So I found it so fascinating when I found out you worked for Janine.
Yeah.
I was like completely frothing.
Like that was, they were a successful brand. Everyone knew, like there was a Boost pretty much
her story.
In every shopping centre. You didn't have a smoothie, you had a Boost. Like it was just like everyone knew that brand so well. And I was just part of that success story. I was working in domestic franchising and back then it was just crazy. We really were playing God in essence to not even awarding, like, we would have an application for a business that was, let's say, a brand new location that would be opening or a resale of an existing franchise. And there would literally be people
lining up
for it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Very different world back then. So that's when I say play God without the religious tone. It was just, it was crazy. So you had a lot of choice back then. People wanted to own their own destiny in business. So that was awesome experience. And then that sent me on this path to working with some really amazing and not so amazing franchise brands. So I learnt the best, like, working at Boost, the best of the best. And then the ordinary experiences, I go, what's the silver lining? It was like what not to do in franchising. And then that then led to me starting, I got headhunted by the founder of this salon brand, and all I knew was he was moving to New York and he needed a CEO, and I was still living in Melbourne at this stage, and I'd seen it, never really heard of it, had no background in hair or beauty or I appreciated good hair. But anyway, so I had an interview and I ended up getting the role. I actually co-shared it for a small period of time with someone that had come from a beauty space. So we had very different skill sets. He moved off to New York, and little did I know that that was the beginning of working with a highly dysfunctional brand that was great. It was a great brand story. And I think the winner was the consumer that was getting, they're having the perks of it, but it wasn't behind the scenes. It absolutely.
So when you took over the brand, how many salons? Because it was a hair salon.
There was 24. 24. Yeah, 24 salons. It was
around Australia.
Around Australia. It was an owner-investor model. So there wasn't one owner of a salon that actually worked in the business. So, this idea had been coined to these investors that you just invest and head office will run your salon for you. Well, I've come from a world where I'm pretty sure it would still exist within Boost now that Janine wouldn't care what you did for a career. You had to give that career up at least for the first year and work in that business.
Of course.
And that was always something that I had in my mind. How can you buy into a business that you're not going to be part of for a period of time? So this was like really quite an interesting space to work in. And then little did I know back 14 years ago about the hair industry being so intricate and so involved, and it's very much a personalized service. This is more than just hair, right? It really is relationships. So, having those tough conversations back then There was a lot of stuff that we'll unpack one day. There's a story
but the
in
business
itself.
model, just so everyone can know, it was more under the premise of a blow dry bar.
Yeah, blow dry bar
service.
Yeah. So it wasn't a full service salon back then, but they were qualified hairdressers and then an owner investor franchise model. So, and back then, they were selling blow dries for $35 and it didn't matter, short hair, long hair, hair extensions, whatever it was. So the winner was, I guess, the customer that was getting an awesome low cost service. The loser was 100% the salon owner that wasn't even working. They had that extra layer of having a manager run their business for them.
But it was never really, like even now when you look back, I remember when blow dry bars came on the scene, you're like, how is that even sustainable?
Yeah.
Because the pricing of wages and everything.
Absolutely.
And the amount of time it takes and for the amount of clients that they would have to produce, I was like, don't their little hands fall off?
Literally.
Literally. Because they would have to do how many blow dries a day?
Look, a week. I'll put on a week. So back then when I first started, the KPI would have been about 73 blow dries a week.
Per salon?
Per person.
Per person?
Yes.
Holy crap.
Because they were still being paid the same hourly. I mean, we're governed by an award, right? So it's still being paid the same hourly rate. So, and that's where I went, something just doesn't add up. But of course, my ego and my determination kicked in. I went, I'll own a salon. I'll prove that we can do it. And one salon turned into 2, turned into 3. And before I knew it was 4 because, I had franchisees that wanted out and they thought, Kirsten will take over this business. So that determination kicked in, and before I knew it, I'm like, holy shit, this is really bad because it was like trying to shift the Titanic. Really, we were definitely moving in a different direction, and I guess that's what led me to you down the track. That I thought, it's important to niche in something.
What's a missing component?
The brand was never going to niche in being that color destination that was really anchored with some big brands already. And that's what led me to hair extensions and doing my own research on that. And that's how you and I became, working together, because I could see that as a possibility for the salons, not only for the owners of the salons, but also I saw that as a career path for people within the blow dry bar network. So yeah, it was really exciting. But goodness me, I mean, that's a whole nother
unpack. We can unpack that story in another
but that's obviously not where I'm at now. You mentioned marketing, and that then, I think COVID was a blessing for me because I think it was a blessing for many people if we take what actually happened globally. But I feel like life paused in that moment when we were told that we had to sit in our corner and not move and don't do that. And, I went, you either fight that or resist it and
you adapt.
Yeah, you adapt. So that then forced a hand. It was kind of scary for me because I thought, wow, like if we had a global pandemic so serious that can actually stop us in our business, I don't want to be in that position where we're told what we can and can't do from a perspective that it impacts businesses. And we've all heard those stories, right? So that forced a hand for me to decide in that moment, is this my true passion? And it wasn't. It was a job. It wasn't where I saw myself retiring. So I started to plan, an exit strategy in essence that included me having another change of career.
But you also, because we were given the opportunity, I think through that to really, take on this marketing journey, which we could see, amongst so many industries that were still suffering.
Yeah.
It just so happened that hair and extensions in a niche, it just flourished.
Yeah. Well, working for owning my own franchise brand, and I didn't have the luxury of having people in every different department. I was every department. So, I was across all different parts of the business, and a good franchise brand has a really good marketing arm. So that was where I spent a lot of my time. And, that marketing, what is marketing, like digital strategy, and that evolved in itself over the years. Once upon a time, Instagram didn't exist, and now we're…
My God, when I first started, I thought Instagram was my marketing until you came along.
So that was the recreation of, the birth of a new career story for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I've retired that brand, and this year, 2023, marked this beginning of a new career path for me, which I love and adore. And I love helping salon owners across many different industries, but, you know, as long as they're salon owner, so far helped many different businesses in a marketing space, in digital marketing.
And you're exactly that missing component.
Yeah,
I feel that in that
Thank
space. You really, really are.
Yeah, I love, and I think my gift is I love helping businesses grow, and I think everyone does need that support network as well. So,
and especially, let's be honest, creatives, we operate in a whole different mindset.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep saying to unlikely CEOs, because where I, you know, fell short, you picked up that whole business, and vice versa. I think we've created that zone of genius of what you bring to the table, what we bring to the table. And when you work it in unison, magic really can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I'm pretty handy with a hairdryer. You know that.
Oh, you're pretty,
right?
you're getting good.
If all else
You're
fails.
getting good.
Yeah.
You're getting good.
You can teach me if you think.
We'll teach you how to curl. That's next.
So yeah, that's really my story, where I'm at today. So
and now
it's definitely,
full circle, that's where we've come together
yes,
to utilize your brains in the marketing area.
good collaboration.
A good collaboration.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think we've gone through and given everyone a little taste of what's to come.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we'll continue on with little topics as we go along with each episode. So if you guys want to, you know, email us or EDM us as well, send us a DM and let us know if there's any topics you wish for us to cover. Feel free to do that. And thank you so much for listening.
Yeah,
and
thank
Kirsten,
you.
I'll let you.
Thank you for listening. I think we've lost track of time. You know, this is our first ever podcast, and it was good to get our story out of the way. And I can't wait to unpack these stories on our individual journeys through this podcast. And you know, if there's something that our listeners can take away, we've done our job. We've done our job,
and we can do it together, staring at each other. Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll catch you guys on the next episode.